Are we good? Are you good? Do
I
you want to
think
take a couple
so.
more drinks?
Yep. This is so dumb.
Yeah.
It was so awkward.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. We're down in my basement right now.
Yeah.
Like Wayne and
we're
Garth.
not. We're renting a space.
We want to apologize for our hiatus. Life has been lifing the fuck out of us lately. We've had lots of stuff going on. Megan lost her poor dog.
I did.
That was so sad. Their family dog.
So unexpected.
Yeah. And then we both have had IEP meetings for our children in the past week or two, which if you don't know what that is, it is a individual educationalized
Education program.
Yep. Program.
It's a big word.
It is. I'm not good with big words. So basically today we want to actually talk about the IEPs, and we also want to go in a little bit about why an autism diagnosis is important. So I'm going to let Megan kind of fill you in more on that.
Yes. I'd love to talk about the diagnosis process. And within the diagnostic process, there's a lot of little subcategories. And if any of you think you have an autistic child, a neurodivergent child, or you're new to the process or you're in the middle of the process, this is going to be different for everybody as a disclaimer. And any professional you talk to is going to have a different approach, a different opinion.
Facts.
So, right, like take it with a grain of salt. This is an opinion, a perspective, one perspective, and I'm sure Danielle's and mine differ
Yes.
too.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So, generally in the state of Maryland, I can speak to Maryland. If you think your child is autistic, you can get an evaluation most of the time through a state program, such as the Birth to 5 program in elementary school,
Is that
et cetera.
like infants and toddlers?
Infants and toddlers or
Okay.
Child Find.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and that varies county by county, but within the state of Maryland, if you have concerns about your child's development, you can reach out to them. And then you have private institutions that will also provide a diagnosis if it's warranted. And there are a lot of challenges to either one of these options. And I think that is something we're going to talk about,
Yes.
is the issues with the diagnostic process. And the other point to consider is that everybody's view or perspective or experience for a diagnosis for their child is going to be different.
Yes.
And so there's a lot going on here, and I think we want to talk about the pros
Yeah.
of pursuing that diagnosis, the potential challenges and barriers to getting a diagnosis, and kind of what all that means. And we can talk about our personal experiences too. And so I'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so I, as I mentioned during the last episode, am a speech pathologist, but I have a lot of education and training in identifying autism and the diagnostic process, particularly for little ones. And so when my son was born, I guess he was probably 6 months old when I knew there were a lot of characteristics. And then as he got older, I saw more and more. The challenge was that to anybody else, they were not as apparent. And to go in specifics, Henry, he met all of his milestones.
Right.
So he talked on time, he walked on time-ish, he ate a variety of foods, he pointed to pictures. And so the qualitative or the things that you could see were there. But the quality for me is what I knew made him different.
Right.
He could play alone for 2 hours. He could memorize movies and script them. He wasn't even 2 when he was literally going off on a tangent for these things. He could really hyper-focus on certain things, which made him a genius in certain areas. And in other areas, really struggled.
Like astronomy and dinosaurs.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to know anything.
Yeah.
Recently, biographies.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Stepping it up, Hen.
anybody you want to know about? I know. Yeah. So we actually did 2 evaluations as a part of a research study at a private institution, and he did not meet the diagnostic criteria for autism.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't believe I didn't tell you.
Yeah.
He didn't. He was borderline.
Okay.
So we were sort of, I wouldn't say we were dismissed by those professionals, but they were like, he's just quirky. He's just his own person. He's individual. And honestly, at the time, internally for me, that was really hard because I was sort of fighting the understanding that I had for my son. Mm-hmm. I knew he needed different supports and he was different. And I wanted to talk to my family about it. And I wanted to just know more about him. But I trusted the professionals and I assumed that I was just an anxious mom. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when we are dealing with other professionals such as teachers, family members, all very well-meaning and loving people.
Totally.
They thought I was crazy.
Yeah. Same.
Yes.
I even had a friend who worked with autistic kids come over, and she was like, "No, I think kind of like what you said." And I also think maybe it was also the love she had for me. Maybe she didn't want to be the one to tell me. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think we don't. At least me. I forget my subconscious feelings and thoughts that are influenced by society and sort of what I was told growing up and, in my early career. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for Henry, we sort of catered to his needs, his strengths, and treated him like an individual, which is what I hope from every family, right?
Right.
Regardless of your child's development and what they're doing, their diagnosis,
their label.
They are people. They are them.
Yes.
Let's just support them, right? But as he got a little bit older and was having a hard time in school, behaviors, another podcast episode, I hate the word behaviors, but I'm just saying it. And then just with peers, he really desperately wanted to engage with kids and to have friends, but it did not look that way. Right. And so we sought out an evaluation at a hospital that was far removed from us. And he got the diagnosis. And I mean, they were sort of looking at me cockeyed, how are you coming this so late? So it was just really interesting. And the whole process with getting a diagnosis, I think I don't even want to get into today because that's a whole other, what's that saying? Bag of worms? No, that's not it. What is it? It's a can of worms.
Can of worms. Yes.
It's a whole other can of worms. But it really made me reflect on the diagnosis, right? And what the pros are, I don't want to call them cons, but the challenges are. And for us, just getting the diagnosis that we knew was a fit and appropriate for my son was hard. Mm-hmm. And then finding a professional who we felt would see him, for him was hard. And honestly, seeking an affirming diagnosis was impossible at the time. I don't think anybody, went about his evaluation in a way that was we see how amazing he is. And he is amazing. And this is his neurology. This is his profile.
Yeah. I don't think there are still a lot of affirming, maybe for adults. And I think the world is learning and evolving, and hopefully we'll get there. Mm-hmm. But affirming, I just don't see them doing it yet.
No, I mean, there are more options for adults.
Yes.
There are some options for children, and if anybody's looking,
feel
free to reach out.
Yeah.
I have them.
Yeah.
But no, it's really hard to find. And when we say affirming, I can sort of define that. What we mean is by highlighting a child's strengths, not using any deficit-based language, or even directly comparing to neurotypical development. Our brains are hardwired to do this because we are taught that autism is not normal, and that it is not desired. So anything we say, it's they are missing something, they are not doing something, they didn't do it as well as we want them to, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. It could
So
be their way.
Instead of saying this child did not say words, we could say this child communicated with gestures. Instead of saying this child engaged in repetitive play, we could say this child aligned items. They enjoyed categorizing. It doesn't have to be a deficit. But to throw those people a bone, this all is derived from the insurance system,
Oh, totally.
the medical system,
Yes.
that has decided they won't pay for or reimburse families for anything if their child doesn't have a deficit. So we're still writing our reports in a way that is deficit based because families need to get reimbursed for the services that they need for their child. And so, I mean, insurance systems are a part of it. And, I think that's another thing to talk about. Not only do you want to use your insurance because you're paying for it, but your insurance isn't going to cover the cost of an evaluation.
Nope. It sure doesn't.
No. And so that's going to vary depending on where you go. And the affirming evaluations are likely private pay because they don't have to write for insurance companies, which I appreciate, but who has thousands of dollars to possibly get a diagnosis? And then insurance companies, like you're, paying this deductible to get a diagnosis that your kid needs, that you waited for 2 years because the wait lists are so long. Just to name a few barriers to getting a diagnosis for time purposes.
Another can of worms.
Another bag of worms. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So you need that. And then ABA, even if you wanted to pay for ABA out of pocket,
Yes.
the amount of hours and like time and staff and resources necessary to do that is financially crippling.
It is.
So it's not like you could be like, well, we'll forgo the diagnosis and we'll pay out of pocket.
Right.
I mean, maybe a few people can do that, but not the average person.
Not the average Joe.
Right.
I mean, we're down in my basement right now.
Yeah.
Like Wayne and
we're
Garth.
not. We're renting a space.
Wayne's World.
Right.
Wayne's World. Party time.
Oh my gosh. So there was that. Yeah, you have to get the diagnosis for ABA.
Yes, and you also have to get a diagnosis to get on the autism waiver. And I'm really not familiar. Is the autism waiver just like a Maryland thing, or?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is an 8-year wait list.
And they've recently changed the requirements.
Yes, they have.
To get on the waiver.
Yes.
We can open that bag of worms
Yes,
another
we
time
can.
also, because Henry was kicked off of the autism waiver. So there are some different things there, but he needs a diagnosis to be on there.
Right.
So,
And the autism waiver can end up helping with financial responsibilities and respite care, all types of things.
Therapies.
But again, you need the diagnosis.
Yes, that's the first step.
Yes.
And then you have to wait 8 years.
Yes.
So
8 years.
there's that. You
And
better hope that in 8 years
they don't change things.
They don't kick you off the
and
wait
kick you off the wait list.
Yeah. But, and I know, so we chose not to do ABA with Henry, but we needed a diagnosis of autism to establish a 504 plan and or an IEP with the public school system to support him in the way that we knew he was going to need support. And so going into school without those things was a little scary for us. And so we wanted to better describe, how he learned and a diagnosis. We needed that. We also used the diagnosis to get funding through things like the LIST program. So in Maryland, LIST stands for something that I'm not sure of
And
right
that's,
now.
you spell that L as in Larry, I as in ice cream, S as in Sally, S as in Sally.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yes. And if you just Google LIST,
.org.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's 2 times a year that you can apply. The deadline is tomorrow. for this round,
Go
and then
you.
the other deadline is in November.
Okay.
But Liz, if you have a qualifying diagnosis, which is not exclusive to autism,
I didn't know that.
yes, it just has to be a chronic disability.
Okay.
But there is a list of like yeses and nos.
Okay.
But that opened a few doors for us financially to get things like out-of-pocket therapies and things like that. There are some really other good resources in the state of Maryland that maybe we could probably do an episode on too, that you just need the diagnosis for.
Yeah, we
And
could even
so-
maybe post something like on our
Oh, that's a good
Facebook
idea.
page,
Yeah.
like a list.
forgot
I
that
don't
we
know,
had that.
links.
Yes, links.
You know, we're
Yeah,
in we're in
it'll
our
be
late
fancy.
30s over here, guys. We don't know technology that well. We're
working on
just
A little scary.
we're faking it till we make
A little
it.
scary. I mean, even the mic
Yes.
is just, I'm figuring this out as we go along.
We're evolving.
Right? Who said change is bad? Not me. So there's the financial hurdles, but there are financial hurdles to get the diagnosis. And then there are hurdles that you need the diagnosis for more financial resources. So it can be really tricky.
Yes. I want to actually throw out there also that I got some financial assistance through the ARC
Oh,
of
yes.
Baltimore.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And
The ARC is great.
they actually helped us get Lucy's device, her AAC device. So that was nice.
Yeah, and there are, more state-based and national-based grants and funding programs.
Every little bit
For AAC.
helps.
Totally. And that's why a diagnosis is important. Sadly, and I was saying this to you earlier, like my dream is that we all live in this world where there's no diagnoses, right? That we just like support one another and we see each other for our strengths and our challenges, and everything is equitable and just and accessible, and accommodations and modifications we don't have to fight for. That is like a dream, like that, it doesn't matter if you're autistic and I'm allistic.
Right.
It just matters that like we're able to access things that are going to help us live fulfilling lives, right?
Can you explain to our listeners what allistic means?
Allistic is non-autistic people. So yes, my dream world. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it
matter,
doesn't.
right? Like, you don't need a diagnosis to get therapy. You don't need a diagnosis to get funding. Like, we're all just in this together and we're here to support each other and we're all contributing something. And I think that's a really far away thought, but I'm hopeful that one day we'll be there. Until then, diagnoses are really important for financial reasons, for insurance reasons, school funding. But then I don't want to forget about just a better understanding your child too.
And I also was going to ask you a better understanding of themselves.
100%. It is never, and I'll put this plug in here, but it's never too early to talk to your kids about their diagnosis. In fact, it is so beneficial for so many reasons, because autism is nothing to be ashamed about.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you. It's not an illness. It's not. It's just who you are. It's what makes you who you are. It's how your brain works. It's how you
Your brain
learn.
is literally just
Wired
wired
differently.
different.
I mean, I can't think of a good analogy right now, but it's literally just like you have two different spoons. One's a soup spoon and one's like
Yeah.
a cereal spoon. And you're not going to look at the soup spoon and be like, I can't eat my cereal this morning because I don't have a cereal spoon. Like, it's a spoon.
Right.
And, it can do the same thing.
Unless
It's just,
you're on the spectrum and
well,
you
this is true.
cannot.
This is true. Or it is true. Bad analogy. Erase. But you see what I mean. It's just a different way of being human, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if your child goes through their life not knowing that they are wired differently, this could be incredibly hard for their mental health.
Yeah, I think it's like detrimental.
100%. And if, talking about dark stuff, like in the neurodiverse communities, things like suicide rates and mental health challenges are astronomically higher than the rest of the population. And there are probably a lot of different reasons for that. But one of the main reasons is because the neurodiverse populations are working so hard constantly to fit in to a norm that they don't understand and that doesn't make sense and that they can't do. And they don't understand why it's so hard,
Right.
or why people don't appreciate them. And I can't imagine, I say this about my son all the time. He works harder than anybody else every single day to just show up and be, let alone learn in the standard way, communicate in the standard way, interact in the standard way. He has to work so hard, and he is still perceived as different, and he knows he's different because we've had that conversation. But it's still got to be exhausting.
And Henry came to you, right, and asked
did.
you.
Yes.
Okay.
And he is, even before he was able to communicate that he knew he was different, he knew he was different. Like, I think even if you have a child who's non-speaking, do not be fooled. Like, they are very aware of what's going on, and they understand what's going
Edu's
on.
book.
And this is a plug for the book that has, there have been many books that have changed my perspective. But Edo in Autism Land, written by Edo Kudar, is one of the most perspective-changing books. If you are a parent, caregiver, loved one, friend, teacher, therapist, neighbor, literally anybody who's breathing, you need to read this book.
Yeah.
It is written by a non-speaking autistic male who was given the gift of communication by people who believed in him, and he is able to talk about everything that we're talking about.
Good job.
No, I should probably do this for a living, write summaries of books.
You should. Yeah. It was so good.
Such a good book.
We really recommend everyone to either read or listen. It was very insightful.
It is. And I think, I've been for, maybe the past 5 years of my career, like a huge believer in any and every kid and their comprehension and view, perspective, their cognitive skills. I think I can see below the surface a little bit better than some people can, and definitely what society can. And this really just affirmed what I was thinking this whole time, and I appreciated it, because there's so much in there. Even if you don't know, or it doesn't seem like it, or your child's never shown you the traditional way that they can do something, please presume competence.
Yes.
That they can, they will, they do. And this book, is a testament to that.
It really was.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing.
I feel like such an asshole when I say good job to Lucy now. I literally want to punch myself in the face.
100%.
Take
it out of your repertoire.
I'm I just said that. Why?
Gosh. I just finished the chapter where he's talking about all of the women who've ruined his life.
Yeah.
And he was don't think I'm being sexist by saying that, but everybody in these professions are women.
Yeah.
And I was it's me.
But you're not like that anymore.
Well, I'm always improving.
Yeah, but that's with everyone. We're all evolving, and we're all trying to do better.
You're right. And when you are reading this book, that is a good mindset to be in, I think, when you are reading or listening to it, is that this is a new perspective and we're all learning and growing together.
Right.
Same with another book plug, I Will Die on This Hill. Such a good book.
So good.
So good. If you're in your advocate era, that's the one. That's the one you got to listen to.
Which that's our era right now.
Yeah, it's our era.
But we're trying.
Yeah. Understanding them and how their brain works is going to foster your connection with your child. And so that's what a diagnosis is going to do. You get them, you can just dive in, right? And when your child gets themselves, it really opens that door too.
Right.
So, these are...
And I think it's questioning, why don't I fit in? Why do I feel different? Why am I weird?
Why is this so hard for me? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Why am I
yeah,
stimming? Why are my hands flapping? Why do
right.
I can't stop making noises?
Yeah,
Like that's hard to understand.
yeah.
And
Why
I
do
mean,
I
I'll
walk on my
be
tiptoes?
right, right. I mean, when we were talking about autism and what it is to Henry, um, it is like finding the words to come up with that are not from a deficit-based medical model were really hard. So what I do usually is find a book, and I usually just like read the book.
Right.
But I have ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of overlapping categories, right? Or characteristics that Henry and I share that I'm able to talk about from my perspective. And I think having those books or even friends or other people in your life that are neurodivergent, connecting your child with them or yourself connecting with other autistics or parents of autistic kids is like the community is strong and they differ a lot in their opinions and perspectives and what they want to do and what they believe. But at the foundation of it all, we're all doing the same stuff, right?
Right.
And that a diagnosis opens that door. And
I agree.
early on, it doesn't matter how early, it doesn't matter how late. Like if you've known your child was different forever and now they're 9, 10, like it's not too late to
No.
pursue a diagnosis. You could be an adult, right?
Right.
Like some of you out there may be thinking like, hey, this happens all the time. Like
Yeah.
parents, their kids get a diagnosis, then they're like, shoot, like I'm kind of reflecting on myself and my childhood and like things are coming together, right? Yeah. And so it's never too late. And I think understanding yourself better, your child better, there's nothing bad that can come out of it.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. I think that is more important really than the money, the schooling. I think it's more important to have an understanding of yourself. I mean, just being human in general is fucking hard.
It is.
Figuring yourself out, growing up, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you add that to it,
Right.
could you
Can't
imagine?
imagine.
Like,
No.
no wonder they have more, depression, anxiety.
Yeah. It's important, man.
It is. It's super important.
And I want to say that with one more caveat that I know that it's not easy either,
Yes.
right? I don't think either of us were like jumping at the bit to get our diagnosis, right? And after the evaluation, it's not like we were like celebrating and throwing confetti.
No.
Not to say that I wouldn't do that now, like if it happened,
Hell
but
no. I'd be like, woohoo.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
now,
yeah,
right?
I'm super proud.
Yeah, don't take me back to the dark days,
Right.
but like there are a lot of parents out there, especially of young kids, that still, and I do get locked in my little neurodiversity affirming bubble a lot, where I'm just like proud of who we are and whatnot, but I know that that is the smallest bubble in the bigger picture.
Right.
And that society isn't really teaching people about this, hence the podcast.
Yes.
And so not everybody is knocking at the door to
Right.
get their kids diagnosed. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, there are cultural reasons. I know that there are some cultures where an autism diagnosis is so frowned upon that your family will disown you, essentially, if your child is autistic. And I can see why a diagnosis or a label would be terrifying to
Right.
somebody in that culture. I also know that if you've never experienced, the celebration of neurodiversity, seeking out a diagnosis to potentially put your child in a box or label your child as something that you perceive to be as negative, I mean, nobody wants to do that either.
Right.
So all of this to say that, we strongly, and I speak for myself here,
No,
I'll let you chime in, but we
I-
strongly
yes.
encourage if you see any characteristics, if you have like any thoughts about your child being neurodivergent, seek out an evaluation to get them diagnosed. If you don't, because of any numerous reasons that we've mentioned or not mentioned, that is okay too. Because as long as you see your child for who they are and you
Right.
celebrate what they can do and you don't focus on what they can't do and you aren't ashamed of them or shaming them, it doesn't matter,
Right.
right? It opens the door for you.
As long as you're just loving them and they're happy, that's really,
Yes, yes. And getting the support that they need, as Ito would say, for communication.
yes.
I love that. He just talks about that always in his book. And he's like, the primary challenge here is communication. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I know.
You're like, it really is.
It really is. It comes down to that. So as long as you're there, and you can't do it right now for whatever reason, that's okay.
Yeah.
But know that there's a community out there too. Just
For
to plug
sure.
that.
For sure.
Even if you don't have a formal diagnosis for yourself or your kid,
Yeah.
there's
I know
a community.
most autistic people or a parent of autistic children would love to give you any advice. I mean, we're all, like you said, we're a community. We're all here
Yeah.
to help each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get here on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I
Same.
had a
Same.
neighbor who was like posting about autism, and I was like, oh, I have some questions for
I
you.
have
You
lots
know
of
what I
questions.
mean?
Yeah.
That's how it started. Can you explain AAC device?
I can.
Real quick.
So AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, because communication is not just spoken. We communicate in a bazillion ways through body language, gestures, behavior. We sure do. Typing, writing, texting, all the ways. And in a lot of autistic people, spoken language or verbal communication is extremely challenging. I won't go as far to say impossible, but like it is really hard to achieve. And there's still a lot of work being done around that and why that is. But just because someone can't speak doesn't mean they can't think, understand, doesn't mean they don't have ideas or opinions. And we have to give them a way to communicate. And the closest thing to spoken language is going to be a computer system that's able to have a voice output, and that is what an AAC device does. So you hit a button and it talks. There are millions of different programs and different ways to activate AAC, but what it does is it gives a person a voice. So think of Stephen Hawking, for example, used an AAC device.
Yes. That's a good example.
Yeah. And you don't have to be non-speaking to use an AAC device. So there are some people who just
Prefer.
prefer it. Some people who have the capacity to use spoken language one day and don't the next. Henry uses forms of AAC when he's in a meltdown and can't speak because he's so emotionally overwhelmed. So there's a lot of different ways you can communicate. But there's a lot of different AACs too, right? So we'll talk about them maybe another day.
Yeah, totally.
Such as
I
things
know.
like picture symbols or PECs.
I know you're like dying to do it.
I know, right? I'm just going to talk the whole time.
Yeah.
Like at a
Yes,
fast
and
speed.
I'm just gonna be fascinated with you over here, and continue to say yes, yes.
Yeah.
That.
Oh my gosh. Well,
With all that being said, a lot of people will ask me. People ask me all the time, "Do you think Lucy will ever speak?" And
does that bother you?
yeah,
Just put that.
especially now that I am becoming more affirming and unlearning ableism. Yeah, it bothers me because she does speak
Right.
through
does
her device.
Yeah.
And Lucy has an iPad and she uses Touch Chat, which is an app that puts out her words. And honestly, as long as she can use that and communicate to me what she wants and needs and advocate for herself, I don't care if she ever speaks. I'm more concerned about her communication.
Right.
Her being able to advocate for herself. Her being able to say no. Her being able to be like, back up.
Right. Get out of
Yeah.
my way. Move.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every SLP out there is very proud of you for saying that and appreciates that. But I have a feeling that you didn't always feel that way.
No, I didn't
And
always
so
feel
like
that way.
relating to anybody who's listening,
Yes.
right? Who's probably just thinking to themselves like, I just want them to talk.
Yeah.
So what was the journey like getting there?
I mean, everyone wants to hear their kid's voice. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to hear I love you.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to
Mommy.
hear mommy, daddy.
Yeah.
Luckily, we have Vic gets daddy,
Lucky.
right?
Lucky.
We do get I love you,
Mm-hmm.
which it's beautiful. Every time she talks, I tell her how beautiful her voice is, and I love it. Would it be great if she could talk one day? Of course. But again, I'm concerned about her communication. But yes, it's been a hard road getting to where I am now. And that's with everything with her diagnosis, I feel like. I
Yeah.
just, things have gotten easier. I used to worry about stupid stuff and kind of like compare her to other children her age.
Mm-hmm.
And comparing is like the thief of joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say the same word.
yeah, like it's stupid. Don't do it.
Yeah. I know it's hard, but don't.
Yes, like your feelings are all valid. I hope that you get to the point where communication
Yeah.
is all that matters.
Yeah. And everybody, you will, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think for a lot of people, I can't say it personally as a mom, although I can say that, like, there are things that I worried about that I don't anymore that I still know are valid
Yeah.
because it all stems, in my opinion, from an anxiety for our kids and how hard life is going to be.
Yeah.
And we love them so deeply that we don't want anything to be that hard.
I mean, I totally agree. Like Lucy's starting school, regular school in the fall, public school, and I'm terrified.
Yeah.
And the main
Yeah.
reason I'm terrified is because she can't come home and tell me how her day went.
Right.
Not
Or what
yet,
happened. Yeah.
but she
Not that we
will.
know of. Yeah.
Because she will tell me on her device once she learns. We're just getting there.
And she tells you
Yeah.
through her actions, her behaviors, her moods.
Yeah.
She at least gives you clues,
Yeah.
I feel.
She does.
You just have to tune into them a little bit,
Yes.
right? Yeah,
Agreed.
so I think a lot of stuff to worry about. And I was just sitting over here thinking too about AAC, and I think we mentioned this in the beginning, but AAC devices, you can buy an iPad, right? $300. You can buy a communication program, another $300.
But in November, they're 50% off.
They are,
The
and
app.
in April, yes.
Yes.
So 2 times a year they go on sale, 50% off. Get them, right? And so normally, I mean, I say that from a very privileged perspective, where like if I needed to do it, I could buy these things. I know that that is not
Right.
an option for most people, but insurance will cover an AAC device, but not without a diagnosis.
Right.
So that's another little caveat there. And if your child throws things like iPads or puts them in tubs of water, that is something else you have to pay for
Right.
if you don't have a warranty. So
Yeah. But again, if you have the diagnosis, you can always try to get funding
Yep.
to get a new
Yep.
iPad.
yeah, it all comes back to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think they mentioned this in I Will Die on This Hill, but like, get it when you're going for the diagnosis, just dissociate for a bit, or just don't listen to anything they're saying.
But yes, again, autistic diagnosis is important.
It is. If you're thinking about it, make the leap.
I even say ADHD.
100%.
I mean,
Yeah. I was diagnosed as a teen, and then I sort of like stopped taking my medication and forgot about it until
Yeah.
after I had my kids. But knowing more about myself and sort of how I operate and looking at my challenges from a viewpoint of my neurology instead of just my laziness has been really life-changing to me.
Yeah.
So I think, any sort of neurodiversity is really worth exploring.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
The laziness thing.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
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 I always say that, like, my whole life, I've been late to everything.
Not Megan.
But
She's never late. Never. She's
wink, 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 wink.
never late. Ever.
What is fascinating is that my perception of time is phenomenal. Like, I could probably tell you right now how long we've been talking. I can probably tell you what time it is. It's amazing. But my planning to fit things in is very poor. And so, anyway, I've been late my whole life to everything. And I do categorize things based on like, how important is it for me to be on time to this thing versus this thing? And sort of they go in this system. But I wish, if I could go back, I wish people would stop saying, why are you so late? Stop being late. If you just got up earlier, you wouldn't be late. If they would have just said to me, like, this is how your brain works, I think I would be a totally different person in terms of my lateness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's too late now. I'm late to this party. And so I've just accepted it.
Megan will be late to her own funeral.
I will. I'm literally late to everything.
It's
and
okay.
if I'm early, I'm so awkward and uncomfortable because I'm like, what do early people do? Like, this is, no one's here. Food isn't out. Like, this is awkward. But
Thank
I
God
really
you
wish I
have
knew.
really nice clients.
I'm telling you, they get it. But you know what? Like, now when people call me to like initiate services, it's literally in my pitch. I'm like, I'm not on time. And if you have a problem with that, I can give you some referrals.
I think it's good to like,
It's just
own
who I
it.
am.
Own
100%,
that shit.
100%. And honestly, if that is a problem for you,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's a problem. Like, I
Yeah.
get it, you know? And I want to give you the opportunity to go somewhere else that's going to
Be
be
on
better.
time.
Yeah. And it's just
I love
it's
that
just
you
who I
own
am.
it.
Right?
I
And
love
but I
it.
will never sell you short. I'll always stay the full time.
Yeah.
I'll always give my all.
You do.
It's just being here at the second I need to be is not ever going to happen.
I totally agree
Yeah.
with that entire statement.
100%.
Yeah. Lucy had a BCBA who was the same way, and she owned it too.
Yeah.
She was just like, sorry.
No excuses.
Yeah.
Just like, here I am.
And I feel like I have more respect for that.
100%.
Like, own it.
Well, and I mean, please know I'm not like
no. It's
sipping coffee, staring out the window, thinking like, I'm just going to be late. It's literally just the poorest planning ever. And the days where I'm actually going to be on time, I get so upset when like I hit a traffic jam, or like something goes wrong. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. I was going to be on time.
Yeah. Like
Whatever.
today, you're like 695 hates
It
me.
literally hates me. There was an accident on the other side. And I was like, you
even
got to be
more
kidding me.
annoying.
And it was like a fender bender.
But you were probably looking too, because I always do that. I'm like,
yeah.
stop
Everyone's
looking
going
and
so slow.
drive.
I'm like, oh, I'm going 21. So yes, I got it. Oh, man.
All right, guys. Well, I think we are done for the day. Don't forget to subscribe and tune into our next episode. Hopefully, it will not be 10 years from now. Hopefully, life gives us a little
Grace.
Yeah, a little grace since it's summer.